and is here to launch his latest novel, A Trail of Crab Tracks. And we have the other two books of the trilogy. This is the final book of the trilogy, which sort of looks at his home country, Cameroon, from pre-independence, the colonial scramble, and how it comes into the age of the internet, as we'll see with the last book. The first of the series is Mount Pleasant. That was initially published in French in 2011, and it spans 7 decades from about 1931 through the character of Sarah. And she is a 9-year-old taken away from her home to be the wife to an exiled sultan, and she sort of embodies Cameroon's history from that time. And then you have the second book, which is When the Plums Are Ripe, whose English translation was available and published in 2017. And it looks at Cameroon's history before, during the World War, and just how Cameroon was split between Germany, France, and Britain in that period. And it's a lot of humor, a lot of thoughtfulness in the characters. And then you have the final book, A Trail of Crab Tracks, which is available in English as of June this year. And it sort of reconciles Cameroon's past and present, and it looks at it through the character, the relationship of a father and son, and all the characters around them. Nganang has also written several other books that have been translated to various other languages. There's German, I think I saw one in Arabic. There's poetry, there's essays. Lots of it is available both online as well as off. And while much of this conversation will be about A Trail of Crab Tracks, I think I wanted to talk about the trilogy as a whole, and also about your own writing pursuits, your interests, your intellectualism. But I think before we start, it would be nice to sort of tease the audience, if you want, with just a section of the book. Any part will do. Then we'll start with the questions.
I always read with music as a soundtrack. And I have a German composer, a friend of mine, who did some sounds for me that I use when I read. Obviously, during these last years, we've done very few readings. The reason being, of course, that we had COVID, and so my second installment of the trilogy came out during COVID. So therefore, I didn't read out of it. And so I'm actually surprised and stunned it survived. So, but it is there. It is there. This book, like all my books, indeed, is about writing. I say during our conversation that I take writing seriously. So, if there is a theme that runs through all my books, and I've published around 15 or something like that, it is writing. From writers to writing. And I may add that writing is a passive activity, so we don't talk about it. But all of us have to, we learn how to write at school. So it is something that we have to do. And if your child doesn't go to school, doesn't learn how to read or write, you'd better do that child. Learn how to read and write, because there is no room for an illiterate child nowadays. So you can imagine 200 years ago, it wasn't the case. But writing is a passive skill. It's not an art. It's a skill. So I'm always surprised that writers are arrested or put in jail because, writers are the ones who are the virtuosos of that skill. So the state that essentially sent all the children to school arrests the writer who is the virtuoso of the skill that the children have learned based on taxpayers' money. That's quite an irony, you see. So this book is about writing as well. As far as Cameroon is concerned, I'm not reading, you can see. But I think you need a context. And this trilogy, it took me around 20 years to finish them. So the first book was 8 years, and the second 5 years of research, of work, etc. So I think it is important that they be put in a context. So in the place where I come from, which is the western part of Cameroon, and I'm Bamileke specifically, so in that part of the country, there were writing systems that people used to write manuscripts. They were not published, and they are not published. They are still not published, and some are in archives in the British Library, for instance, in London. You have many of those manuscripts. And I did use them to write these books. So some, books, 500 pages book, things like that. So, and some are translated into French A friend of mine translated some into English, as eroticas, history books, things like that. I spent 22 years in the US, and so what I've noticed is, first of all, the US makes it impossible for family to visit me. They simply don't get a visa and things like that, and as a consequence, many of my siblings will not know how I live. And yet, I'm a product of them, of Cameroon, and went to school in Cameroon and all that. And so essentially, the US gets the fruit only, and toast out everybody else who produced me. The consequence, of course, is that you have conflicts, you have things, misunderstandings, I'll call them, family misunderstandings, because people don't know me, they don't know how I live. My father, who actually essentially financed my education, doesn't see how I live off that education. It is quite funny because he ruined himself to put me, in those schools, and yet he doesn't even see how I live because, he will not get a visa or something like that. So I wanted to tell that story because, in general, one sees stories of immigration. So somebody who was poor in Africa or was a child soldier and now he lands in New York, he's free, something like that. So I want to tell a different story for people who are in Africa or my family to understand how I live in the United States. I have normal life, installed, I'm a professor, I have a regular life, I'm busy, whatever, so I don't struggle there. I went there to, I had a job, so I have my life. So then, people also at home, they have their life. So that conversation that one has, and I think all of us have them on WhatsApp, so I was just having a conversation with Cameroon, so it's like that. You don't ask, okay, where are you? You simply say, hey, how are you doing? And I'm near Nairobi. That kind of thing of today. My dad, of course, doesn't use WhatsApp, but my siblings do. But they still will not get a visa, you see. So, so that is the story of this book, a combination of the past, of the colonial context where writing is banned, but also today, where writing is so fast that one can actually interact with each other, without even asking where the person is located. Right, so the first book is, I would say my dad, he's in the snow, he just visited, he's there at home. So this must be what death. This must be what death is like, death. What else could it be? Death. Waking up groggy on a day when the sun is slow to rise, slowly, ever so slowly, stretching, extracting oneself from the warm covers like a snail emerging from its shell, stretching. These must be what death is like. Tentatively reaching for the floor with one foot and then the other, the damp fill of bare boards, feeling around, tentatively for the slippers that he'll never get used to, but are so warm once they are on, yawning, trying to conjure up some warmth to compensate for what the body is losing. Standing up, opening the curtains to see the endless white stretch of the world, suddenly so different than the night before. The tree, the leaves, the bushes scattered around the yard, yes, the whole yard, and even the sky itself. The horizon shrouded by death. And it was of death that Nitap thought, of his own. Who could say, who could tell him, tell us, any of us, that death isn't waking up to a snow-covered world?
Thank you for that. I think one of the things that has struck me mostly about reading through your work, and even that in itself and how you are reading it, is this thing about echoes, whether it's in the sound itself or repetition, or even in how the stories thread themselves. And I don't want to give too much of plot away, but then, in that you explore adultery through ages. You also explore conflicting identities. So I'm just wondering, how deliberate were you about placing these elements in the different books so they could build each other and then reinforce that message?
About adultery, I always wanted to write a book, a novel of adultery. So a novel of love is a genre of the 19th century. So that is, Anna Karenina, that kind of novel, where you have really a history being shaken by love. So I wanted to write a novel like that. That was my dream. The first, before I wrote this novel, and I hope I succeeded here, I think I did. So the other thing I always wanted to write was, Yaoundé is a fairly colonial town, it's frozen. So people from Yaoundé don't know that, but because I've worked in history so much, I can see that it's frozen in time. So it hasn't changed. And so of course, you have a few small buildings that are built around there, but they are nonsense. The city itself, in its character, in its organization, etc., hasn't changed at all. You still have the basic structure of colonial life. And in the middle of it, you have that colonial palace of the former governor, of the French governor, where it was built in, it is the story of this book. But I always wanted, I don't use it that much in the second part. But I wanted to see, there is no novel of adultery without a ball, without dancing. You have that large ballroom where they come, you have Anna Karenina, they dance there, you have Madame Bovary, they dance there, Jane Eyre, they dance, and now you have somebody looking, he sees her there, she sees him, the husband is there when he's doing whatever. So, yes, you see what I mean. So, and it needs a colonial setting of a large room, of a bar, of music that is not African music. No, not African music there. Really colonial music. But the 60s provided for that, where our parents still listened to lots of colonial music, but yet had that strong sense of nationalism. But at the same time, they enjoyed all the musics they were listening to in the 50s and 40s. They were in it, totally. So I wanted that. So the novel is around it as well. And of course, because that's the plot, in essence. And a novel of adultery in general is located during a time of upheaval. So where the earth is cracking, and they are there having their adultery scene, and the earth is cracking as well. It's a mixture of the snow and Madame Bovary and the landscape of Bamileke land, and you have a sous-prefect who is running after his mistress, the husband who is waiting because it's civil war, you see. And, the Bamileke where I come from went through a very brutal civil war. I think you had a similar war of independence here. And in our case, it was after independence or civil war. So people don't talk about it, and particularly the parent generation, they don't talk about it. And so I wanted to have the civil war as the backbone to that story of love and hate, if you want, of destruction and passion. So that is somehow this, yeah.
That also takes me to some passage from, I think it's When the Plums Arrive, let me just look for it, which is about, because the way you describe writing uncomfortable things or writing about upheaval, it was on my notes, say, page 34. Poker was correct. History is a difficult thing to write, which is why he wanted to take a break from it. I'd say, and maybe you'd agree, that Poker had chosen a bad time. To his mind, however, there was no better time. He had already waited 3 years with his belly full of Alexandrian verses, his mouth full of impatient rhymes, talking with his friends, and he was distracted because of the intense memories the place had awoken. What do you think are some of the most uncomfortable things you've had to write about or interrogate in Cameroon's history?
Oh, I come from a tribe that was killed in genocide, so that was very difficult. I know people don't say tribe nowadays, but I say specifically tribe because we were targeted because of our ethnicity. So therefore, that is the most difficult part to write about because it is still happening. I mean, now in Cameroon, the jails are full of Bamileke people. It's not even a joke. Cameroon is a landscape of murder. So that was the most difficult to write about. First of all, even to say, I am Bamileke, a sentence like that, And when I wrote it for the first time on my Facebook page, the hatred that came towards me, unbelievable. I was just reading when I was sitting here, the thing that are happening. You have an MP, because there's a soccer game happening, a national soccer game competition. And so he wrote that in the Bamileke neighborhood, people are supporting a team that is a Bamileke team, and in the northern, the neighborhood of the northerners, they support that other team. So, and people started, I don't know about it. We are mixed in this country. We marry with each other. We are kind of brothers, each other, sisters. Look, my own children, they are Bamileke, Hausa. Oh, wow, it's like an advertisement for the country there. I say, wow, that's not the country I grew up. I grew up in a Bamileke neighborhood 100%, full stop. So I needed time to be able to even articulate that, to be able to say that, because of the hatred that has been mobilized against the Bamileke all along, and the Northerners as well. You have the list of the people who are killed. They come from the same region, all of them. And that is the context that, those books narrate. So I had to think about it heavily, really. And that's why I took that much time to write, not only to do the research, because the research is, of course, hidden, it is destroyed, it is banned, like that writing system. It is simply, it is joked about. People are transformed into comedies, into working jokes. So I had to work on myself to be able to write those things, to be able to articulate them. So I would say the most difficult has been to really deal with myself, because I grew up in a world where I felt I understood everything. I felt I'm at home in Cameroon until Cameroon expelled me. I felt, I had friends until the friends didn't defend me. I felt, I could eat some food because I felt, I was trapped in a prison where all the people came from one tribe and I came from the other tribe who wanted to kill. So with those combinations, I think I had to understand the reality of Cameroon itself. And because a novelist has to be honest. You simply cannot lie when you write a novel, because you write through the psychology of your characters. And a character that articulates something goes from that person's interior mind. And these are things that I had to work through. And it was very difficult, very painful indeed. And I know these are things that are difficult to talk about in Africa because we don't talk about them, tribalism. So we tend not to talk about, and I suspect it's difficult in Kenya as well. We tend not to talk about them. We tend to blame the West very quickly to avoid talking about that. And racism, novels about racism have so much success. If I wrote about racism, it would be. But tribalism is come on, it doesn't make any sense. But so I'm surprised it had that much success, translated practically everywhere, but at the same time, it was a struggle, really, to articulate that.
It makes me think about the epitaph you have where you talk about, the world, what is the line? Let me just read it. It's from here again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where you say, the whole world is my country, Cameroon is my subject, and Yaoundé is my field of vision. The fact that you're able to interplay all of those external influences, whether it's colonialism or, which country was laying claim to what, into a national space like Cameroon, but then into an intimate place like Yaoundé. And how do different readers, whether it's an international reader or a reader from Cameroon or a reader from home, how do they receive your writing?
Yeah. So the thing is, let's say I am 42, close to 43. So essentially, it's not my first book here. The first book, you pour your soul in it, and all your greatness and limitations, you pour your soul in it. But then after the first book, now you have to think, oh, gosh, I've said everything, but now I still want to write a book. In the US, for instance, I'm shocked to realize that many writers publish only one book, and that's it. So I don't know how they do, but I publish a few. And so it means that after a while, I had to start thinking about the system. So what systematic thought do I have here? And it happens that, my background is philosophy. From when I was 13, I always wanted to be a writer. So I've been thinking about writing all along, and I always felt that writing is something that you have to take seriously. And and my own training is German. So as such, I tend to think very much in a German sense of, systematic thinking, was ist das System here? What's the system? And if not, I'm not happy. So I'm happy when I see a system here. For instance, this novel, I drew them. have the color. This is green, this one is white, and this dot comes here, and then it transfers into this, and that type of thing. So it's my way of writing. And so therefore, from the very beginning, I felt that I have to have an alignment of all my novels according to the neighborhoods of Yaoundé. And I write only about Yaoundé. So everything I see, even here when I see people, if I have a memory of Nairobi, if you see it in one of my books, it's going to be in Yaoundé. So, so it has become systematic. But the other thing is that is spatial, right? It is therefore spatial. But the other thing is also time. It's that Yaoundé changed, for instance, when I was there, when I was growing up during the 80s and 70s. It's not the same Yaoundé you have now, even though it is frozen. You know, people still listen to the music of the 60s and 70s. And when I pass, they still play the songs of back then on the taxi. You say, wow, they're still playing it, something like that. So it is frozen, but there are slight changes, small changes that people can experience, and that is called history. So I wanted to record that. So therefore, even if I go from neighborhood to neighborhood, these novels play out in different times. So you have the first, for instance, it is the 20s, it's World War I. You have the second, it is the 40s, it is World War II, and it is the 60s. The third one, it is the Civil War that we had. Of course, now you have another civil war, which is against the Anglophones. Cameroon always needs a community to kill, so it is part of a certain pattern. So following it also helps me have a dynamic of that history, how one neighborhood, for instance, suddenly becomes a center of bloodshed, and the other ones actually feel that they are going to kill that one, and then suddenly it is them who are now the center of the bloodshed, and it's turning against them, and it is the same, it's that same frozen continuity that is repeated in the form of a cycle. So therefore, historically, I could very easily go from one neighborhood to the other and have a panoramic view of it. You can see with it, I can easily include France in that. I can include Germany in that. I can include England in that, because the three colonized Cameroon anyway at a moment or another. And then I can include the United States easily because, you know, England is linked to the United States anyway, and I live in the US. So it becomes quite systematic in my mind. So that's my relation to the world at large when I write. But it is still rooted in Yaoundé itself.
I'm also wondering because, of course, when you're writing from history, it means you're using facts that are not changing.
Yeah.
But then you're writing characters, and characters are very mercurial. People, you know, take up their own lives. Mm-hmm. How do you reconcile that? Yes.
Let's say characters, it is, what I just said there is, let's say, the philosopher in me. Mm-hmm. And of course, I have books on theory of writing. That's part of it. You know, I think, you know, it's not my first book. I think we understand each other there. And I think there is room for, in African writing, in African literature, for writers who write systematically, for writers who do research before they write, for writers who actually take that thing seriously. There is so much room for it. And I suspect the moment those spaces are given up, writing becomes poorer because, you know, the experience changes. The things that, for instance, one of my books is Yaoundé during the 90s. It's Dog Days, translated here and there. It is the 90s. And things happen, it is looked at from the point of view of a dog. So the dog looks around, it's spatial, etc. But now, I did build some tension there. 20 years later, that tension has become a genocide because it is turned against the Anglophones. So now I have to come back to it to have another dog, and the dog smells blood, etc., etc. The last dog there was smelling blood. And now we have real blood. Wow, it's amazing. It is thousands of people being killed. And say, okay, let us have the same dog. And how am I going to look at it? Because the war is happening in the English-speaking part of Cameroon. It's very easy. Very easy. You have an internally displaced person coming to Yaoundé. And it's done. So that is how I build characters. It is through history, but also through observation. I think for the first novel, I did use so many newspapers. I had a stack of newspapers like this, even though I did pass through, that was my time, the 90s. So I was there. But I still needed newspapers to be able to be accurate, because a dog will not lie. A dog will name a cat. So let us be clear with it. So I need to have the facts. So I worked for that. And for 2021, 22, and from 17 to now, I also, you know, have stacks of, you know, news, which I use for those novels. In other words, I am quite concrete in the writing that I do. The same for these books. The research is concrete, and but at the same time, it is not a thesis. You see. Maybe I can mention a footnote there. You know, a few years ago, people at a university in Switzerland came to the idea of doing a symposium. Another one is happening, you know, with scholars, etc. on my work. It's very interesting because many of them were historians. And when historians read of Cameroonian history, they actually underline the dates. So if your dates are wrong, they will tell you that your dates are wrong. So I don't want that to happen, particularly in novels of now, of the 60s, or even of the 40s. Right? So I don't joke with accuracy. I do fact-checking. I was arrested during a fact-checking mission, actually. So I fact-check with people, interview people who were there. Oh gosh, interview people who beheaded people there in Cameroon too. And they gave on video that, we did that. You know what I want to say? It's an old man. One says sometimes old Africans are wise. See an old man, he tells you, I beheaded people. I say, yeah, old man. Those people were from my tribe, you know that? He did not know that. He asked me, what's your name again? I said, no, I just forget it. Yeah, bye-bye. And then his family comes, his life, I say, yeah, it's life, Africa, But you see, that is the way I write. It's fictional, but at the same time, it's concrete. So as such, when my first reading in Cameroon was in 2003, I actually remember, I did not do that many readings in Cameroon because of, what you know. But, I remember, Rome was packed there, and, people came, they hugged me so much because they did not expect those type of things to be in a book. You see, so Africans, or I don't know if it is the case in Kenya, we say things, we do things, we actually have a language that is outrageously impossible, but we do not expect it to be in a book. So when people say, they say, you must be joking, it is literature, you put that in a book. I say, that is our reality. That is what makes up our lives. Yeah. So people in Cameroon enjoy the books. One, Mount Pleasant was published in Cameroon as well. And I published a few books in Cameroon. I did so many things I still do in Cameroon. Yeah, sure.
It feels like the writing process is very collaborative because you're reaching out to communities and reaching out to people who've lived those experiences. And the majority of your books are in French before they're translated. How is that process of translating it to a more wider audience outside home? How is your relationship with your translator like?
It has evolved. I started writing seriously, I said, in 1995 when Ken Saro-Wiwa was hanged. And the type of writing I did, because I always somehow felt that some other people will read what I write to say what they think about it. And so I gave it to one of my teachers there. He read it, Professor Simo, and he said, okay, what I think is that with this type of writing, because you live abroad, so it's going to be difficult to sustain because you need the voices, the accents of people, the intonation, the type of sentences they build. Because when people speak, they have a particular diction, and for a country like Cameroon that is frozen, people speak like during the 17th century. So they can really have a conversation, a 30-minute conversation with sentences that are totally frozen. And they will be shocked to see those sentences in a novel. But yet, that is a novel that's being written in front of me. So, but it's also, so I decided somehow, maybe I should add there that because I was living in Germany, it was very easy for me because my mind was frozen as well. So I don't speak, my French wasn't transformed by any living in France. So my accent was still, the Cameroonian accent is still because I've never lived in France. So it was very easy for me to have that diction of Cameroonians. And therefore I could easily write in French as well. And I kept it going until now, after a while, I've lived now for 22 years in the US, I simply felt, let me move on. So and also, French has become, pretty bloody in Cameroon, so I don't want to use it anymore. So, and, there's no advantage in doing that. Everybody speaks English anyway, so. So with it, I moved away. But that collaborative way of writing has remained. The social media is the best form. I use it to incite people. I post outrageous things and they react to it. And I get the juice out of what they say. And it lands in my books. For instance, this last book, I would never have written it without the social media. Never. Particularly because, first of all, I did not know of the genocide that was happening against my own people. I did not know that. So it is people who gave me the tips, gave me the places to go, go to this village, they have a mass grave there, go here, go there. These people came and killed these other ones, go to these people. And there's no photo of those type of things. Zero. So I went to those. I suspect they are maybe somewhere, but let's say they're not available. So I went to those places because of those type of tips. And with social media, it's very easy. The person tells you, you say, where is it? And the person is there somewhere, maybe in Japan or in New York. Say, go there. Patrice, go there, And, because after a while, I have a certain, let's say, companionship with my followers. And so they know what I do, and they know that what they give me end up in these type of books, and they are happy and proud to actually be named in those books as well. And so we communicate with each other. And so collaboration, therefore, is not, it is tangible for me. So I use it as a method. I call it, choral writing. So like this sound around, I need it all the time because it is the sound of people who tell me what to do, who tell me where to look for things, or who react. Of course, you have the systematic hateful reaction of the government people. I know them already of the military, so they are kind of similar. I have their tempo, so I can say, but the people who are genuine, they have a specific type of arguing their case, and they end up in dialogues very often. So that's how I write those dialogues. I write those dialogues out of the responses of my followers, at least for this particular book. And I'm very much amazed that it had so much presence, that people enjoyed it. Because without Facebook, I would never have written it. Never have written it.
And I'm interested in what your other influences are, whether it's other writers, music, or who are the people you look to when you want to write.
Well, let's say when I was in my teens, I saw numerous there when I was in my teens. I did mention, Richard Wright. Could mention Hemingway. I cry when I read, Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's a shameful moment, but that's true. And French writers, Sartre. The thing is, we went through a school system where you read great writers, from Kafka to whoever. So I was, also I love school. I had nothing against school. I simply loved it. So I read those, and in my school we had a library where I always went. So they used to, the teacher loved me, used to give me all the books. You can take 5 if you want. Just take them. And my dad also was a librarian. So I grew up amongst books. But then, of course, when I started writing seriously, I felt there are some writers who actually give me a certain sense of what I want to do. So that's where Soyinka became kind of at the center of what I think a writer can do. Because I suspect, it's a personal suspicion, and I had it before, that the type of writing that younger writers do, of my age, even a little bit older, has relinquished lots of things. For instance, it's not normal that the writer is here and this room is the way it is. Normally a writer, because all of us learn writing at school. So all of us, 100%. So it's not normal that people would then gravitate towards a stadium. It's not, because the passive learning that we do is activated by a writer. So that relation of the two moments is essential, and yet we have lost it. So I always felt that, a writer, the way I see it, should restore the position of writer at the center of society, at the very center of society. Like, writing is not an art form. It is a skill. It is not an art form at all. So the continuation of writing will be things like coding. And I hope in schools, our children learn code, because my child learns coding. I hope here in Kenya, people learn coding in schools, because that's the future. So if you're not master in that, you have relinquished your future. You can think about cinema, about dancing, about this and that, but you've essentially relinquished your future to somebody else. And being that I'm in the United States, I can tell you exactly whom you have relinquished your future to. So with it, the writers who influenced me have stopped. I think that was when I was writing in the first moments of my own life that I had influences. But with Soyinka, I also saw that writing being at the center of political life, it needs to be committed. So you need to have a sense of defending the people who cannot defend themselves, of articulating the things that they cannot say, of simply, being in a dangerous space where they don't want to be, or where they are every single day and don't have the courage to articulate that, to empower them. So building schools, cleaning streets. We did that in Yaoundé, bridges, a couple of bridges built, mobilize communities. Let's go and do that. Wake up in the morning, have boots, come on. Let's go and do that. And we do that. And people realize that writing is not only going to school to read a book, but it has as a consequence that, look at this building, it is writing that did that. Yeah, so, because people judge writing on the results. So, this school, yeah, we did it together. Guess what? The money that came from this school is the fundraising we used, that we did using the few emails that we sent, or using the T-shirts that you sold on which it was written, like the T-shirt we are outside there. I am this school. It is a sentence. Guess what? I am this school. A book is made of sentences only, and this is one. So with one sentence, you can build a school. Like, duh. And how many kids go to that school? Thousands. Isn't it? Yes, my school goes there. Well, aha. So did you help me build that school? No, I was busy. Next time. Next time, don't be busy. So when people see that writing is tangible, has results, the type of results that they want politicians to have, that a writer can actually provide that, they take writing seriously. As serious as when they send their kids to school to learn writing. So they tend to take it seriously as well later on. So I would say now I don't have that many writers I look up to, as one would say, for influence or things like that. No, I am deep inside my community, and the social media provides for that.
That's interesting. So I was thinking about how do you sustain that activism, especially now that you're away from home and you can't really go back easily.
That's true. Don't tell my wife, don't tell my dad. These are the two things that are important. Because what they will say is, what were you thinking? Anyway, so I don't tell them. That's the number one. And but it's a reflex I had from my childhood. My dad never read the things that I wrote anyway. So one day for my first reading in 2003, so he said, I'm going to come. I said, Dad, you are not coming. He says, I'm a free man. I go where I want in this country. Guess what? I read you're having a reading. I am going to be there. I don't need authorization for you. That's how he went to my first reading, and the only one, because he said, I don't. I make sure he's not informed. He doesn't come. In any case, writing is a place where I can be a fool. But I still think that, that where I can do things that are daring, like in a book. But I still think that, Africa has relinquished the role of, the position of the writer heavily, and maybe left it to the older generation, and which is sad. The Ngogis, I'm here in Nairobi. I don't know what you think, but me, I think of Ngogi. So we have left that to people like him. And I think it's a strong mistake. Back then, I told a friend of mine, there's a house that always needs to be occupied. It's the right of the writer in politics. So if you leave politics to politicians, you've killed your life already. So you need to have citizens activated all the time. And that's the writer. Because the passive moment of the skill that we have, the writer activates it. The passive moment, we all know how to write, but very few of us write books. We could write books if we wanted, but sometimes we don't have the time, we don't have the energy, we don't have etc. the patience, all that. But the writer says, guess what? I'm going to be the monk of this writing that we all have. I'm going to dedicate my life to that. So it is the athlete of the passivity that we had. And I think we have to bring that back, and we have to make sure that, that the writer has a location in the city.
I mean, I think there's ways that that's trying to come back. A lot of it is online, because like you're saying, online has become quite a big space. There's the thing about infrastructure for writing, because publishing is quite expensive here. I think we're talking with Ahmed outside, who was saying that buying books is really expensive. And just being able to nurture writers as well. it's not really a question, it's more of a statement of it's a difficult industry in terms of nurturing because it takes in so much money and time, and many people are busy trying to make a livelihood. But there are lots of spaces where writing is emerging, like online, which is what you're interacting with as well, which is quite good. Are you finding ways to nurture that, especially if you see talent?
Oh, I mean, somebody who is 52 who passes in front of a talent and looks away is not 52. So, because I'm a product of the people who nurtured me. So I'm a product of, I mean, really, the number of books that people gave me, my professors, my teachers gave me, just read this book and bring it back to me in 2 weeks. Have you read it already? Have you read it already? I would not even take books seriously. My dad himself, I mean, he was a librarian. He puts the journal in front of me, simply goes away, he's open to the page. He knows I'm going to come and look. That type of thing. Yeah, but of course, he censored the most important pictures, those juicy pictures, he's cut them all. He puts them, parental control. I won't argue against that. I cut as well, so. Exactly, whatever. So what I'm trying to say is that we have today a different understanding of writing. Many writers, I think, write for a book. And actually, even back then, when I was, because maybe what I should mention, I got an award when I was 17, and television came to Cameroon in 85. So I was, it was in 87 I got the award. You can imagine there was only one TV station. And I got an award. I was on TV every day with 17. So with it, I saw all the possible ramifications of celebrity. I saw where I should put my boundaries. I saw where I should say a statement. I was 17 already. So I don't have any issue with the CNN, navigation, etc. Zero. I saw it in Cameroon already. I walk on the street, people know my name. Patrice, from TV, because I was in the news all the time. So with it, I think that having grown inside the fabric of writing, I have simply noticed that many write to appear on TV. So many write to be famous, to be seen. Many write to actually, be in the news or something like that. So I don't share that opinion. Or many write to be published. That's what I wanted to say. I don't share that opinion. I simply do not. Because not only late in life with these books, I've mentioned all those manuscripts that are so important, and they are in the British Library. They are not published, and they were banned. And they are not even translated. You see, and they are so significant to Africa, to African history, to Cameroon history, etc., etc. But they are not, nobody has, but the books that are published, you read them, they have no significance to anything. So with it, now I will say, I will not be writing for publishing. But even back then, when I really started writing seriously, like in Nigeria, I mean, it was literally in the context of Cancer River being hanged. So I essentially saw that writing can be dangerous. And his son was campaigning in London, etc. And I met his son, he died now, And so it means if writing can put you in such a danger, why will you be writing in the first place? Right? So publishing for me is really not the issue. The issue is, what do you want to say? What do you want to say? That for me is the issue. So the structures always say, yeah, there are no publishing houses. Oh, it is so expensive. Oh, I don't have access to the internet. Oh, electricity is not working today. Oh, power cut. I simply see my own student who comes and say, yes, I didn't come to class yesterday because my grandma died. Yes, I get that. So many grandmas died, but class has to go forward. So what do you want to say? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? You are here on the street, you see yourself. 200 years ago, it wasn't like that. It is people who thought about it and made it possible. So what is your own thinking? How is Kenya going to look like in 100 years? Are you going to put your footnote to that? That, for me, is the point. Because, the state does that all the time. But you yourself, as an individual, you can transform it by injecting your own thought in it. I tend to I talk maybe too much, but, I love being here, and it's like family for me. So you have a sea, you have, let's say, a bucket of water, and you drip, a little bit of color in it. You see, it changes totally. So you don't need that much to break a stone. It is water that breaks the stone. It's nothing else. So if you understand that, your significance becomes actually large. So not the publishing house, definitely not. Not the agent, definitely not. But what do you want to say? And what do you want to do? So that's what I will say to, to that statement about publishing, etc.
Okay. I guess we have a couple of minutes left. Are there any questions from anyone or anything you'd like to talk about? Oh.
My question is centered towards the trilogy. You mentioned that it had taken you 20 years to actually finish the whole set.
Yes.
And I wanted to know, was there a difference between the kind of writer you were when you started, as opposed to the kind of writer that you were when you finished?
Yeah.
And if so, what difference was there?
Thank you very much. Yeah. It is, we all want to have fun, dance, etc., etc. Writing is fun, I can tell you. If you want us to dance, blah, 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 blah. But I think that is a moment when I will say, look, me, I have a PhD, and I'm going to value that as well. I'm not going to spend my life dancing. No, I'm a US professor, and I come from Cameroon. To get there, I had to pass through Germany and be there, and it's not easy, so I had to knock. So my writing cannot be dancing all the time. I wanted to have a few novels where I articulate the complexity of who I am, without those novels being my own autobiography, simply by having characters that I think I'm intelligent, that are intelligent, where, those characters don't have foolish thoughts, where they actually articulate things, discuss the issues of their time. Because, me, I'm the product of those people. So if somebody says independence, that person had to think about it. You will imagine somebody who was 30. Of course, when I was 30, I was thinking already. I had a PhD. So if I put a novel during the 20s and I have people who are really thinking about World War I, I don't want them to say, yeah, the whites are coming here and killing Africans and Africans are running around. Come on. What the hell is that? I say, yeah, they will say, what are they doing? What are we doing? What's our contribution? How is it working? And what is the profession of those people? What kind of skills do they have? What kind of jobs do they do? And in those jobs, in those specific jobs, for instance, in Mount Pleasant, you have people who do sculpture, you have people who do calligraphy. So they have to have a specific system of thinking in what they do, because they wake up every single morning and do that thing, be it building chairs. So they have to have a vision of what is the measurements, etc., because they will never miss, even if they don't have a role. You see what I mean? So I wanted to have intelligent books that reflect the age, the time they are talking about, but also my own, can I say maturity, when I was 40. Because that is somehow the books that I wrote when I was 40. So I wanted, even when I talk about love, it's not, simply, I say it, of course, adultery, etc. But, the love of a mother to a child. For instance, a mother who has lost a child. The child has a name, it's an orphan. But the mother doesn't have a name. Why is it so? So why is it that the biggest tragedies you have everywhere, you have wars, the first things that it creates is mothers who lost a child. But the mother there doesn't have a name. I mean, English, maybe my English is not good enough. What's the name for that in English, of a mother who lost a child? So why is it that you have that hole? And yet you have World War I, World War II, you have Civil War, you have all that, and what does it kill? It kills always children of mothers. So I want to express that particular type of love that doesn't have a language. That is a hole in languages, where you really have a feeling there is so much emotion in it, but yet it is not articulated yet, you see. And I suspect I would never have had those thoughts when I was 20, because love for me was something else. I mean, preppy, I don't know, whatever, out of poverty. And but with 50, with 40, I think love becomes something else. And I wanted to articulate this level of even intelligent emotions. Right? So that will be my answer there. So these are books, I am very much proud of them because they reflect the person I am now. And I'm very much proud of the books I wrote before because they reflect the person I was before. I was younger, for sure. I love them. It is simply a different character I had, a different level of experience, right? Something like that.
When you're preparing to write these books, you've mentioned you do a lot of research, and I have no doubt you come across stories, like you've mentioned, of tragedy and great atrocities that have been committed. How do you separate whatever negative emotions you get from that and confine them just to your writing?
Yeah, it's very difficult, particularly now that we have those androids. The English-speaking Cameroonians, they know that I articulate their plight. And so they send me all those videos, graphic ones. If I post them, I'm blocked for 10 years from Facebook. They are very graphic. The first question is, how do I sleep? That's the first. Or does it have an effect on me, because I receive those pictures every day. And they are not in the news, of course, because, it is French hegemony there. So, France has to give a license to that. And Nigeria doesn't care, so it goes nowhere. So how do I deal with the stories that people tell me, or even the ones that I tape? Because for a trail of crab tracks, I went around the place of civil war and taped interviews, videos and all that, and posted them, of course, on my page. That's the first thing I do, to remove them out of my system and to have them out there. So it makes it possible for me to be free of them. But of course, a novel is not a thesis, it's not a dissertation. It is a novel. So the person who reads it needs to have some form of enjoyment. And so that's why I need so much time to write and rewrite, to have first draft, second draft. For instance, Mount Pleasant, I wrote it in English first, because the information I had was so much, and French was diluting it. And my French back then was a little bit, still very much close to the day-to-day French interaction that I had. So I wanted to have a language that is free of the present. So therefore, I wrote it in English first, and 700 pages or so. And then I rewrote it in French now, translated it back, and now it is translated back into English. So that's the way through which those personal testimonials disappear. Because at the end of the day, you want to have a novel that's readable, enjoyable, that people will actually keep as, a treasure. And so that's what I do. And the consequence, of course, is when people read it, for Mount Pleasant, you have people, from Germany come to give me letters of their grandparents who were colonials. Here is, the photos of those years. It's because of the type of research that I did before. So it awakens a reaction, an intelligent one. And, yeah.
I found it interesting when you said your relationship between coding and writing. So usually first, do you know how to code? Or?
No, I don't. I hope
okay.
But my daughter does, yeah.
Okay, so, usually people who are good at coding are very good at maths, so physics, etc. So, but also very good software developers, they tell you that it's a very creative process. So my question would be like, can you expand a little bit more, because I think it's very interesting, how much, for example, it's important to have software written for local content, because now most of the software is written in the US and in India. And how much, books in the future will be written in Python or SQL?
No, it is, okay, my answer is going to have two parts. The first is, it's going to be cultural. It's that I need a time to realize, I'm going to say tribe again, the type of tribe I come from. Because the Bamileke are very much STEM. So engineer, banking, and all that. So if most of them are in Germany because of that reason, or in the United States because of that reason. It's that these are people who are, I would say, pragmatic. They are not metaphysical like the French are, very much pragmatic. You can already see that the conflict between the Bamileke and the French came from there, that the Bamileke tend to be pragmatic. And so they're in commerce as well. So, from petty commerce to large commerce. And so that is the culture I come from. I gave up math, I must say that. And most of my friends, when I talk about the type of writing I do, they tend to say, yeah, mathematics. But I tell them that I decided to become a writer when I was 13. And the decision, either in a STEM or something else, was ahead of me. And I had decided earlier that I want to be a writer. So therefore, I simply removed every single thing that was on my way. Now, that was the first part. Regarding coding today, I think I said at a certain moment that African writers have relinquished so much, and it seems to me we don't even realize what we've relinquished along the way. Essentially, we've simply accepted the form of writing of the 19th century, and we are navigating in it. But the writing of today has maybe even 90% of it as coding. I mean, we all use an Android, but somebody has to think about it. Is a writer part of it? No. An African writer? No. So these are the type of things that one has to put on the table. When I was in Cameroon, I had a writer's house where I wanted, because I work so much with IT people. As a writer, I have a team. From Shoyinka, I understood that the writer needs to have a team. So I have a team all the time, a designer, as you can see, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a team of people with skills. Say, guess what? We need to do this. How many informaticians, we have 2. IT, do this, do this, do this. And they're not in the US, they are in France, in Cameroon, everywhere, South Africa. With social media, it's very much easy to do that. And so in the writer, in the writer's house in Cameroon, 90% will have been coding. For instance, how do you create not only, the code, but also even the content, video games. You have so many video games there. So do you have writers doing that? In it? No, African writers. Most of us hope that our novels will become films. But the money is in gaming. So why can't we have content for gaming? Why don't we look into that? You see, it is a full range of professions that are open to youngsters. Right? I have professorships. We have professorships in gaming in the US. So why do you relinquish that? I'm not even touching the aspect of coding itself. You see, it is still content. And now if you take coding, you have a continent, ours, the African continent, that has essentially relinquished coding to Asia. Why are we not in the game? So what the hell is happening? Where one is dealing with, we have here somebody from Mount Pleasant who invented a writing system. In the depth of colonialism, in the depth of World War I, he still invented the writing system. Somebody who is today, who has everything. I mean, yes, the genocide, clear, but come on. Middle-class kids, he cannot think about coding. They tell you, come on, in colonialism, he was inventing a writing system. What do you do? It's a type of education we have, because we talk a lot about education, but our education is not propelling towards the future. And therefore, we've abandoned all those segments of writing to Asia. We have really willingly abandoned it to Asia. And in the next century, of course, Asia is going to hit the United States. Even Americans know that. There is no contest. But Africa will not be part of the game because we've abandoned coding, you see. So we need to start being smart, to start thinking about writing in a way that fits to the century we are living in, because we haven't started doing that.
May I ask one last question? Touching on, and thank you for talking us through your work of the historical trilogy. And I am curious about history being revised, history being deconstructed and reconstructed to suit certain narratives. And so since you said that your work is collaborative, you work with a lot of communities, which means then you have access to lots of histories, and we also know that they are very subjective. How do you then choose whose history to narrate, which history to have as the history of Cameroon? And I guess that just makes me wonder, can you authenticate these historical facts, seeing that there's a lot of subjectivity based on whom you're talking to?
Yeah. No, I am a hidden Marxist. That's number one. So I believe in history written by the oppressed. That would be number two. So there is no way the oppressor is going to write history for me.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is the position of principle. I mean, that will be actually my position at all. I'm a hidden Marxist, even a vocal Marxist. I'm even a communist. That's why I have read here, one will say. I'm not joking about it. So it is the oppressed. But the point is that the oppressed is concrete. The oppressed is not a position of a theological position where I will say, all the oppressed of the world. So now the oppressor will also say, yes, me as well, I'm oppressed. You know? I am French and I was oppressed by, you know, whatever. Come on, give me a break. Like I'm French and the US is oppressing me. No. No, no, no. You are the oppressor. So because I think one of the most important parts of writing, because of course writing is passive, but the writer activates that passivity, is also that the oppressed is passive. The oppressed doesn't articulate her or himself. So the task of the writer is not only to articulate that, but also to name the enemy, because the oppressed is afraid to name the enemy. To say, this is the person who raped me. This is the person who killed my daughter. This is the person who burned the village. And in Africa, of course, it's more complex because we have tribal rivalries, we have tribal wars, we have all that. So somebody will say, oh, we have a state that is still shaky and feels that it can kill you and there, and nobody will say. They say, come on, you brought people from your community and you are the ones who are killing all along. What do you think you are doing? So the task of the writer is not only to articulate, to vocalize the, let's say, the passive presence of the oppressed, but clearly to name the enemy. Oh, without doubt, it is you. You are a Nazi, full stop. Oh yeah, you take a side. You are a Nazi, full stop. And guess what? Nazi is not an opinion. It has to be defeated, full stop. So that for me is why you don't have to share that, but that's the way I understand writing, is that it is in the battlefield, and you take sides. And me, I've taken the side of concrete oppressed. It has values, that greatness. You know, I've seen running campaigns, you got run lots of campaigns, you free lots of people from jail. Lots of them, you know. You run a campaign, after a few months, a person is free, you know, and you know yourself it's because of the work that you did. So it has lots of beauties to have somebody really walk out of prison because of the work you did. You know, building schools, et cetera, you can see. So it's possible to understand writing like that and for it to have an effect. Because I think writing is not, it has real consequences on people's lives. It changes things. It's my real conviction that writing changes things.
Thank you so much for that, for your very honest responses, and everyone for engaging with what Nganang had to say. There are copies of the book outside. Please do get one. They're really, really wonderful, honestly, not just because he's here, but because I've also read them. Enjoy the rest of your stay here.
Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of the evening. Come back tomorrow.